Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and it's another episode of Fun Ideas Podcast. And today we have a returning guest. He talked about one of his other books, which we will re-promote here tonight. This is a person who does a book about animated characters or famous people that appear in animated cartoons from the past. And his name is Matthew Hahn. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fine. Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. And briefly, I'll show all the books because I have them here. Okay. I don't remember. I think we talked when you did the animated Marx Brothers. And is that your first book?
That was my first book. Yeah, the first time I think I talked to you was when the next one came out, the animated
Okay.
Peter Lorre.
Yeah.
We
And so
talked
then
about
the second one was the animated Peter Lorre, and that's this
it,
one
right?
here.
Yeah.
And then now the third in the trilogy so far,
Uh-huh.
the animated Universal Classic Monsters. Ooh.
Yay.
Okay. So, this is a little bit different, just because it kind of covers fictional characters, whereas Peter Lorre and the Marx Brothers arguably were realistic. Um, I think I talked to you before you started the Universal Classic Monsters, but you kind of said, hint, hint, hush, hush. It might be to do with Frankenstein and Dracula and those types and everything. I go, okay, mum's the word for now, but now it's out, obviously. So,
Right.
um, I guess the inevitable question is, what made you decide on the Universal Monsters for your third book?
Well, I was at the Mid-Atlantic Nostalgia Convention promoting my Peter Lorre book, and the guest of honor that year, or one of the guests, was Riku Browning, who of course played the creature in the water in all three creature movies,
Mhm.
and people just loved him. And I was walking around the convention and just it was monsters everywhere, and I knew that the monsters had been in quite a few cartoons. I knew it would fill a book, and I just didn't have any idea how much of a book it would fill, but
Right.
uh, so I figured that was the way to go. That was what I had to do.
Okay. And I know because I've already read the book, but I mean, which monsters do you cover to fill people in on what qualifies as a universal classic monster?
Well, the Universal put out, I think in 2018, they put out a 30 disc set of all of what they consider the Universal classic monster movies,
Mhm.
and the ones who had their own sets were Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Invisible Man, the Mummy, um, the Wolfman, the 1943 Phantom of the Opera with Claude Rains, and the creature from the Black Lagoon.
Mhm.
So if you go in, as you're going into the series more, there are other monsters who are mentioned and who appear, and so we end up covering about. Well, there's the bride, of course, who doesn't have her own set, but she's definitely one of the big monsters. And then there are other monsters whom I was very happy to find animated avatars for.
Mhm.
There's Bela the werewolf from the Wolfman, played by Bela Lugosi originally. There's I believe that I saw the Werewolf of London in Night of the Living Duck, and unfortunately, I wrote to Greg Ford, and he couldn't remember if he had put him in there or not.
Yeah.
It almost has to be him.
Yeah.
So we end up covering about a dozen monsters. There are 19 monsters, as I say in the book, and then we cover about a dozen of them. And I don't, although the trailers of the contemporaneous trailers include hunchbacks and mentally ill people as monsters, we do not
Okay.
consider human being monsters. But some of the hunchbacks do appear,
Mhm.
and some of them are even there were no Igor hunchbacks in the original movies, and
Mhm.
but there's a lot of Igors in cartoons. But sometimes Igor gets gets called by his correct name, Fritz, in the original movie, and
Mhm.
in at least one case, there's an actual caricature of Dwight Fry. That's in a slot machine.
Hmm. And do you cover things like well, like Dr. Frankenstein himself and Van Helsing from Dracula and things like that, or do you stick strictly to the monsters?
Well, if they're in, I cover really in this series. I try to cover at any time anybody makes an appearance. If Eddie Cantor walks in, I put him in the book just
Yeah.
because it's interesting. People are interested in caricatures, and if somebody else wants to do Eddie Cantor or whatever, you can look in my books and get some information. But I so if there's a Dr. Frankenstein in the book, I talk about him, and he's usually not Colin Clive.
Hmm.
Um, usually not a. I can't think of any characters of Colin Clive. Sometimes vocally, but there's Karloff is caricatured a lot. He plays a mad doctor who puts together a monster or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, and that's it. Van Helsing is in very few cartoons, and he's not a parody of the original actor.
Okay. Okay. And I guess yeah, you just stick with like the universal ones from what I remember. You don't go into like other iterations like the Hammer films or anything like that, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's a ton of cartoons of Gary Oldman's Dracula, but I mean the book was already long enough. Actually,
Hmm.
it was too long, and so I just stuck to the Universal monsters, and we have I have sort of very strict guidelines, and I mostly stick to them.
Hmm. Now of the three books, since you've done Marx Brothers and Peter Lorre as the previous ones, was this one the easiest one to do or the hardest or about the same?
Well, it took a longer time just because there were more cartoons, but now I know what I'm doing. I know where to go to get the information.
Hmm.
I know all of the websites of voiceover actors and uh, all the wikis and you can go to these wikis for any cartoon, the Family Guy, and look up Frankenstein's monster, and it'll give you every appearance of Frankenstein's monster.
Hmm.
So so in that sense, it was a lot easier. And I had I have a research assistant who helped me on the Peter Lorre book, and he was on board, the whole time for this book, and he really helped out a lot. His name is Mark Pollock.
Hmm. Okay. And since you put out the other two books, I figured you may have discovered additional appearances of the Marx Brothers and or Peter Lorre since those books have come out. And if so, is there a second edition of either of those books coming from you?
I found a ton of Peter Lorre's that I missed because all of the Igors are Peter Lorre's for the most part. They're just like Peter Lorre's, just doing random appearances. Um, there's one cartoon I watched with Heckle and Jekyll, and they're robbing a pyramid, and so I thought, oh, maybe the mummy will be in this. I don't know. And the mummy's not, but Frankenstein's monster is in it.
That's funny.
Also, Harpo Marx comes out playing the cymbals. But yeah, I have found a lot of Peter Lorre cartoons and a few Marx Brothers cartoons that I missed.
Hmm.
I don't plan any second editions at this time, but
Yeah, you never know. um, and I think because I've read all your books, it's like you cover the whole gamut or spectrum of animation. So you don't stick with just theatricals. You cover TV cartoons and everything else. So what don't you cover? I guess where do you stop?
my first book I had originally I had animated GIFs,
Hmm.
and my editor said no. you can't do that.
Hmm.
And so I cut that out. But everything else I can think of is in there. There's music videos, there's made for video, there's internet fan films, um, commercials.
Okay. And even if it's like partially animated or something like that, you still include it if the creatures themselves
Yeah,
are animated. Yeah.
right. As long as the monster is animated, and even if there's a cartoon and somebody holds up a picture of Dracula, as long as it's drawn, it's in the book, or as
Oh
a
wow. Okay. All right.
picture of Frankenstein's monster. Um, and like there's a ton of cartoons where almost every cartoon does a Halloween episode every year, and so there's a lot of people dressing up like the monsters, and that's all in there.
Hmm. One thing I have to look up here before I ask you this, because I noticed it, uh, is you do have a lot of anime in here, and you actually use Japanese characters and stuff. How did you do that? I mean, did you typeset all that or translate that yourself, or how did you get that in the book? I don't.
Well, yeah, that was a big bone of contention at one point, but they I wrote it. I had the uh, I had the keyboard on my end, and I think I cut and pasted them. That's
Hmm,
what it was.
okay.
I cut and pasted them, and then when I submitted it, they were like, "Oh, how are we going to do this?" But they did figure it out. Um, and the those I only did that when there is like Kaibatsu Kan, the first series
Mm,
that only exists in Japanese,
mm,
uh, and there's no title, no list of titles in English, certainly no synopses. Doesn't seem to have ever been subbed or dubbed except for the
wow.
original, the pilot.
Now, how did you find out about something like this?
Well, Kaibatsu Kan is pretty well known. They did two series.
Hmm.
They did the original was in black and white, and then they did a color one a few years later. But there have been movies, there have been
Okay,
live action shows, there have been live action movies. So it's pretty well known, the whole franchise.
I see.
And I found a guy, and he had every one of the original episodes. So I got to see all of them. The second one is really hard to find. I didn't find it, and I had some. I had about 40 episodes dubbed into Italian,
Wow.
and so I had to extrapolate what was going on. And fortunately, a lot of those episodes were just remakes from the original series. So I could say, oh, this is a remake of episode 19A. And but the other ones, except for there's a few odd ones. It had an afterlife in Italy, as they say,
Mm,
Colombia, and India.
wow.
And you can find two or three episodes dubbed into, I guess it's Hindi, I don't know, on the internet, and that's it. And there were over 100, like 180 or something like that episodes originally. I mean, there still are, but they're just not available.
Hmm. And I think I asked you this when I interviewed you before, but have you watched all these cartoons that you talk about in the book?
Yeah, everyone that
Hmm,
I write about, I've seen. If I haven't seen it, I make a note of it.
okay.
But there are a few besides Kaibutsu Kan. There's a show called Little Dracula, which some of the episodes, like one whole season, is not available
Hmm.
here. There's another one called uh, there's another show that's only available in Switzerland for some reason.
Hmm.
Uh, so some weird things going on, but got to see most of them.
Hmm.
There's about 1,200 cartoons in the book,
Very cool.
and as I started to say before, the the book is now it's 500 pages. Um,
Hmm.
when I finished the first draft, I knew it
That's
was too long, and I cut like 20,000 words out of it,
hmm.
and then I submitted it, and they're like, "Oh, it's still too long because 500 pages is the absolute maximum for a Bear Manor book." As you know, you just did a 2 volume book,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, so I they actually had to make the type. They had to change the type from 12 point to 10 point
Oh
to
wow.
fit, and we just barely made it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of funny because I think early on, Ben Omart wasn't so strict. And so a couple of my books, yeah, they're pushing like 700 pages, but yeah, he kind of put his foot down by the time I got to the Mad one. But the Mad one I was planning to do in 2 parts because had I kept it together, that would have been 900 pages.
Well, I
So
thought it was on the. I don't know if they had the same publisher, the same actual physical publisher back then. I thought it was on their end that they could only do a book that was that length, but
they could
I don't know.
probably do it more than 500, but I think the
Yeah,
rule of thumb is it starts the back starts to break, because just the
well, yeah,
sheer
that's what
weight of it, so it's just a cosmetic type thing. So more than can we do it? you know, I
I
mean,
remember. I remember talking to you in the very early stages of writing this book, and because when I first contacted Bear Manor about the animated Marx Brothers, I uh, exchanged a couple of emails with Ben, and then he said, "Okay," and this is July. He says, "Okay, turn it in by Christmas," and so then I did the animated Peter Lorre, and that was in January, and he said, "Okay, have it done by Christmas." And so I actually went to you before I pitched it to Ben, and I said, "I don't think I'm going to be able to do this by Christmas." And you said, "Oh, don't worry about it."
yeah,
So yeah, he gave me the time that I needed.
yeah. So how much time? I mean, we've talked before, but how much time all told did it take you to do the Universal Monsters here?
Well, took about 4 years, almost 4 years from the contract to production, but there were a lot of delays on
Yeah.
the other end. Um, and I mean, there was one point where I took 3 months off to do something else, and while it was working its way through the editing, and just stuff like that. But eventually, it all's well that ends well. It came out, and
Hmm. Yeah, I think it just depends on what the project is. I've been able, probably the fastest I've done a book is under 6 months, but that's really fast. Um,
yeah,
the Mad one was probably one of the longest ones. It was over 4 years, like 4.5 years. And
yeah,
I knew that, Ben doesn't remember this. He told me this, and I put it in the book. He was bugging me for years to do a Mad book, and I didn't want to do one. And the main reason I didn't want to do one is I knew it'd be a massive undertaking that would take a few years to do. And so I said, it's not my highest priority to devote this much time to it. But one of the weird blessings in disguise is the whole pandemic, because I had a lot of free time because I really couldn't go anywhere. So, yeah, hey, so that helped me to get it done. I don't know what I would have done if it was under normal time like now. It probably would have taken me about 10 years to do. I don't know. Well, anyway, I guess the inevitable question is, and if you can't disclose it right now, that's fine, is there another animated book series book that you're coming up with or working on?
Uh, no, not at the moment. I mean, when I originally I thought, oh well, I'll do W.C. Fields, I'll do Ed Wynn, I'll do Jimmy Durante, and I just I don't know if there's a market for that.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking about other things. I've been reading a lot of movie biographies, and that really interests me. And I've been working on a proposal for a book on the movie Sorcerer, and I've been working on a proposal for a book on A Night at the Opera.
Hmm.
And the other thing that I'm thinking about, and I haven't really done anything on it yet, is I've been reading. I retired a couple of years ago, and been going back and rediscovering some of the things from my youth, and I was really interested in the old west and the wild west, and especially bandits and
Mhm.
lawmen, and been reading a lot of Tom Clavin books lately. And there's a guy named Al Jennings who was a lawyer in Oklahoma around the turn of the 20th century, and his brother, one brother got killed by this other lawyer, and the other brother got I think was wounded, and so and the guy who did the shooting got off,
Hmm.
and so Al Jennings was like, well, screw it, I'll just become an outlaw then, and he did. Started robbing trains,
Hmm.
and he wasn't very good at it, but and he got caught, and he got pardoned eventually. He got released, and he got pardoned by Theodore Roosevelt, and then he became a filmmaker.
Hmm.
And and then,
Wow.
and then years after that, he goes back to Oklahoma, and he runs for governor,
Wow.
and he win, but it's a pretty interesting story, and I don't think it's very well known. There's never been a full length bio of him. He wrote a bio, but that doesn't even cover the last 40 years of his life.
Hmm.
And he wrote a Romana Clef about himself, novel, and and there's a movie about him with called Al Jennings of Oklahoma, with I think Dan Duryea, and but that's almost entirely fictional.
Hmm.
And oh, he lived to be. He was born in 1863. He died in 1961,
Wow.
and he got to be on "You Bet Your Life" with
Hmm.
Groucho in the
Wow. Did you discover him by doing your Marx Brothers book, or had you known about him prior to that?
um, I'd known about him prior to that.
Oh, okay. All
I
right.
known about him actually. Before I knew he was on "You Bet Your Life," I was
Hmm.
just reading him books about the Old West.
Hmm. Interesting. Now, the book I would like to see, but if you're not doing any more animated books, that's fine. Is perhaps clumping all the other comedians together. I mean, everybody probably says, "Oh, do a Three Stooges one, do this one," but yeah, if Marx Brothers is a little bit special, and maybe Three Stooges would be too. But if you could put them all together in one book, unless it would be this massive tome that would be 1,000 pages, I can't think of that many comedian appearances in old cartoons, but maybe they were. Yeah, I don't know, but
Yeah, yeah, I've thought about that. Other people have said that. There's you had Gary Lassen on. There's a list on his website about um, the Three Stooges cartoons,
mhm.
and it happens to be by a guy I know, Brent Seguin, and it seems to be pretty accurate, pretty complete. So there's not much I could add to that.
Mhm.
I just did an article, well, I guess now it's like a year ago, about the animated Abbott and Costello,
Mhm.
and for the magazine that Chris Costello puts out, and it ended up being combined with somebody else wrote a different article, and then the two articles were kind of mashed together. But so I've done that, and there's a friend of mine named Anthony Mitchell Waite, who's he's actually done Laurel and Hardy, and that was he was one of my original inspirations to the Marx Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know if they, I mean, it's a lot of it's been done, so I'm kind
Yeah.
of worried about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just interesting. Well, of your observations, other than the Marx Brothers, what comedian have appeared more in animated cartoons to your knowledge?
Oh, hands down, it's Jimmy Durante.
Hmm.
Um, he's because what really ratchets up the totals is if you get a Hanna Barbera cartoon. I mean,
Oh
of
yeah,
course, he's Augie Dog or Doggy Daddy,
right.
and but he's in a ton of the classic cartoons, and then he's a regular in a bunch of modern TV cartoons, and he's just everywhere and
Mhm.
still. And I was thinking of doing Jimmy Durante and Ed Wynn because they never worked together, that to my knowledge, but
Mhm.
they were a team in animation.
Mhm.
uh, Andy Goose and Sourpuss,
Yeah.
and they sort of had parallel lives. It's kind of interesting, and sometimes in a lot of these cartoons, we'll do we'll have Ed Wynn, and then they'll have Jimmy Durante come in, and so there's a lot of tandem appearances
Hmm.
that way. But I just, like I said, I don't know if anybody cares about that but me.
Yeah, yeah. Although I have to admit, Peter Lorre, in a certain respect, is obscure. Everybody seems to know the voice, and it's the same with Durante. Everybody seems to know the voice, but I don't know if people nowadays know the name as much. But if you
Yeah,
go Inka Dinka Doo or Ha Cha Cha or whatever, then everybody go, oh, that voice. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. The Peter Lorre book really is. I didn't realize how inside this was, but animators love it. I've had several, you know, well-known animators friend me on Facebook because of that book. I had one guy, Mark Cavaliero. This was just a couple of weeks ago. He uh, well, Kaz from SpongeBob posted a picture of his character, Slappy Laszlo, who's a Peter Lorre fish in the SpongeBob franchise. And Mark Cavaliero posts, "Hey, Kaz," and Kaz and I were already friends, and Mark posts this uh, comment. He says, "Hey, do you know this book?"
Mhm.
And it's my book. And Kaz, yeah, I know that book. And Mark says, "This book makes the world a better place."
Well, it surprised me, but then it made total sense. And I may have said that the last time we spoke about it is, on the Peter Lorre thing, I was just thinking of just appearances like what you have on the cover. I'll lift the cover up where, caricature and the voice, but
Yeah,
you had Ren from Ren and Stimpy and Morocco Mole and different ones that did that kind of hey voice. And it's like, oh yeah, I guess that is a Peter Lorre imitation, but I never really thought about it that way. So if I wrote the similar book, I probably would have just been doing the caricatures, and the book would be like this thick, But I see what you did, and then it makes sense. Um,
yeah.
one thing I was curious about, and I'd forgotten because you gave me this Universal Classic Monsters one a little while back, so it's been a while. Did you put in actual appearances where, like Boris Karloff actually did a cartoon voice, like say the Grinch, or was that kind of like, well, that's not really Universal Monsters, so no?
Well, Boris Karloff is in there for Mad Monster Party,
Yeah,
because my
and that
rule
makes
is,
sense. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, because the rule in the book is that I have caricatures of the actors who played the monsters,
Hmm.
uh, and it turns out to be only Boris and Vincent Price. And in one instance, Vincent Price does play himself in the cartoon.
Hmm.
And but I know I would have included Bela Lugosi if there were any cartoons like that, and I did. I didn't include stuff like okay George, which is of course Lon Chaney. Somebody do I didn't do somebody doing the actors doing a character. If that made
Right,
it.
right. That makes sense. Yeah. So, you have to have your Lon Chaney doing a Wolfman, not you know,
Yeah.
A Lenny. Yeah, I get it. So yeah, your book would be three times as thick. I get it. But that's why it's like maybe you made an exception, but I didn't remember seeing it in there, so I figured I'll just ask. Things that Boris Karloff actually voiced because I know he did a few cartoon voices here and there over the
Yeah.
years and things like that. So and narration and stuff like that. So it's just because he has that voice. He has a great voice. So um did you have any assistance from that book that Keith Scott did, the 2-volume set he did about cartoon
Oh,
voices or anything?
yeah. That's invaluable. I wish I'd had it on the other two.
Yeah, I helped him out on that too because it's like, and he one of the questions he had when he was working on that one is like, how do you get your books done? And I said, so I don't know if you have this issue, but I said, I just work on it a little bit every night because if I sit there and say, I got this big book to do, I'll never get it done. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I don't know if he works the same way, but that's how he finally got it done.
Well, I used to when I was still working before I retired. I used to work in the mornings, and now I usually still work in the mornings, but just like you said, just do it every day.
Yeah. And, I've asked about, were there any like last minute additions that he said, hold the presses?
We talked about this on the Peter Lorre book. There was some kind of hold up, and I found a crap load of new cartoons. Uh, I don't I don't remember that happening for this book so much.
Mhm.
Um, there were several delays, and I would find a few cartoons, but like nothing major. I don't think. I mean, there was new stuff coming out, like Universal came out with a new version of the old monsters, and I think
Mhm.
that was like a almost last minute
Mhm.
addition.
Mhm. I think you did. You put animated film titles like Abbott and Costello, Meet Frankenstein, and stuff like that that have the
Yeah, yeah.
characters in there. Yeah.
Costello meet the Invisible Man.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and if there's any animation in the Universal movies, like Dracula, some of the Dracula turning into a bat is animated,
Right.
and the Invisible Man's transitions, some of them are animated. That's all in there.
That's cool. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Yeah, I was gonna say something about my Mad Book. Oh, Mad Book. Just to say it, since we're just chit chatting about different things, is I had to hold it up too because I had it all done, and then Sam Viviano, who's the art director for like 20 years, he finally says, "I'll be interviewed," and I go, "Crap, he's gonna be a good interview." And so I called Ben and I said, can I hold my book off? And he goes, well, what do you got? I go, Sam Viviano. And he goes, oh, of course, because, and, and I talked to him for about 4 hours. So yeah, it was a lot of information. So,
Yeah, that's great.
so
Yeah.
he'll let you do it. Yeah. If there's a reason for it. Yes. So
I
anyway.
wanted to return to we were talking about how do I decide who what makes the cut,
Hmm.
and one of the moments, the real watershed moment for me was when I was doing the Marx Brothers book, and Frank Ferrante, who plays Groucho Marx, and various stage shows all over the country. He's got specials on PBS. He's a friend of mine, and I see him every time he's within like a 3 hour drive. We go to see him. But anyway, so I was talking to him one time, and he told me that he did a SpongeBob, um, where he played uh, this big boss,
Mhm.
but he played him as Groucho, and then he also played Lyman in Garfield
Hmm.
and played him as Groucho, and so and that was where I was like, oh well, so that's where I made the connection. It's like if the actor intends for the character to sound like Groucho or Peter Lorre or
Right.
whoever it is, then it goes in the book.
Right.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I mean, when we were talking a little earlier about Jimmy Durante or Ed Wynn, it's like a Wally Gator would get in for Ed Wynn, let's say, and Jimmy Durante would be like what you said, Doggy Daddy, it's
Yeah,
because of, the caricature voice, and if you were putting Art Carney, you'd put Yogi Bear and Barney Rubble probably, things like that. So
right. Yeah,
it's kind of weird, you know, I don't know if you did this, but I certainly did it as a kid. You didn't know that half the Hanna-Barbera characters in the old days were caricatures of famous comedians. And I think, probably Jimmy Durante was the first one you go, hey, wait a minute, because he was still alive then.
yeah,
That's that guy. Wait a minute. And then, then it starts clicking together that like they interviewed or imitated Burt Lahr and all sorts of
yeah.
different actors and comedians over the years and stuff like that. So
Burt Lahr sued.
well, the same thing. I don't know if it was sued, but they got a call when I did my Did Fatty Freeling book. Uh, John Biner was doing the Ant and the Aardvark, and he did the Aardvark like Jackie Mason, and Jackie Mason said, "Hey, you're taking my voice," and so they actually said, "Hey, well, then do you want to voice it?" And he goes, "Sure," and so he starts doing it, and apparently he only did like one or two cartoons. And he says, "This is hard." So he gave it back to Biner. He can have it. And he's just doing his own voice. He just didn't want to be bothered doing the cartoons. So he allowed Biner to continue to do it. So and I couldn't tell you which cartoons Mason did, if he even did a full cartoon. He might have even done just a partial one before he
Uh,
just said, "Nah, this is too much work for too little pay." Anyway,
yeah,
so um, anyway, that's my situation. Just various voice artists and stuff like that. But
yeah,
let's see what else. So you got the three books now, and you mentioned the Mid Atlantic Convention. Do you make any appearances there and at other locations?
yeah. I go to the Mid Atlantic Nostalgia Convention. I've been there several times. Um, I haven't been to a lot of other conventions, but I was hoping to get like 3 or 4 more books, and like get a couple more books and in the science fiction horror genre, because Peter Lorre is in that genre,
Hmm.
and of course the monsters are in that genre. But I figured if I had like 3 of them, and then my whole card is the Marx Brothers book. If I had 3 of those, there's a science fiction horror fantasy something convention in this area. I mean, within a 3 hour drive, like every weekend, and that
Wow.
was what I was hoping to do. But if I could think of something to
And
make the third book.
and where are you located? I forgot.
I'm in Maryland, halfway between DC and
Okay,
Baltimore.
got it. Okay, so the convention itself is in Baltimore or is somewhere else?
Well, they have conventions, all it's like Jersey, Pennsylvania.
Well, I mean the
Uh,
one you're referring to that's close by.
that's in it's in Baltimore County. It's
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I'm just curious because I'm always curious about conventions. I don't know if I'll ever get out to all of them or any of them, because for me it's a trek across country, but the Mid-Atlantic one has always been the one that has appealed to me over the years. And Martin Graham's has always said, "Well, if you come out here, I'll get you in." And I go, "Well, that's good. I just have to get out there. That's the hard part."
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so
yeah.
um, and apart from appearing on this podcast, is it doing any other publicity or promotion or anything for the books?
I was humping it on Facebook pretty well,
Hmm.
and Ben has, of course, the checklist of things to do, and I've done most of those,
Hmm.
but not a lot of appearances.
Okay, no problem. I just
Yeah.
asked because, you know, anything else that people should know about any of the three books, but especially the Universal Classic Monsters, if you think somebody might be on the fence about it or anything, to get them to
Uh,
buy it.
well, it's all the books have overarching stories. This is what I think is interesting.
Hmm.
The Marx Brothers book is all about the creators, the directors, and the animators and the writers.
Hmm.
The Peter Lorre book is all about the voice actors, and this book is about the history of Universal Studios and the monsters. And so so even if you don't know anything about the monsters, if you've just grown up watching cartoons, I think you'll enjoy it. And
Hmm.
if you're a monster kid from way back, I think you'll enjoy the all the background information also.
Hmm. Pretty cool. All right. And I guess to kind of wrap things up, I'll show all the books since I have them again. I'll show all three at once. Okay, so we got animated Peter Lorre, Universal Monsters. Wait, I'm doing this backwards. And Marx Brothers here, and they shine in the light. So anyway, but tell everyone how you can get these books, and you know, anything else you want to say about them.
They're on Amazon.com and or BeerManorMedia.com and most other places where you buy books.
Hmm.
Sometimes if you shop around, you can even get a bargain on them. Uh, the they're all available in paperback and hardcover. The Marx Brothers book is available in Kindle and audiobook.
Oh, cool. I didn't know there was an audiobook on that one.
Yeah.
That must be hard to do. I mean, did you do the recording on that one?
No, I tried to do it, and I wasn't happy with the way that it sounded. So the guy named Nat Siegeloff did it,
Hmm.
and turns out Nat Siegeloff is a was a good friend of William Friedkin. So he's got a huge archive on William Friedkin. So I might be contacting him if I end up doing this sorcerer book.
Yeah, cool. All right. And if somebody has a question about, or if they want to let you know if you've missed anything or anything like that, or just, yeah, a general question about any of your books, what's the best way to reach out to you?
I'm on I'm on Facebook. There's a page for each book: the animated Marx Brothers, animated Peter Lorre, and the animated Universal Classic Monsters. And I'd love to chat with people.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, I don't have any more questions today, but
All right.
it's always great whenever you have a book out. So if you have another book coming soon, it might be a couple years, but join me as a guest again. So
Oh,
anyway,
too. Thank you.
thank you very much. And so, yeah, that's our special guest, Matthew Hahn. Again, the latest book is the animated Universal Classic Monsters. And of course, he has the Marx Brothers and Peter Lorre book available from Rare Manor Media. And this is Mark Arnold from Fun Ideas Podcast as your host. And we will see you next time.
Good night.